Right. So what we have discussed yesterday about user stories, Epic's user stories, how to write Epic, how to write user stories, all that we have discussed. Wherein today I am going to discuss about the software testing life cycle, because we have completed business analysis, planning and monitoring, illustration and collaboration. Next, enterprise analysis, requirement lifecycle management, requirement analysis, design definition. Last but not least, solution assessment and validation. Means what solution are we providing and how are we going to validate that, right? So that is all there. Now, being a business analyst, we need to know about the software testing life cycle also. This is what generally, which normally we call it as STLC, software testing life cycle. So this software testing life cycle is almost the same as like SDLC, because whenever we discussed about software development life cycle, in the same manner, we see this STLC also, software testing life cycle. Means if you want to test any project, what are the different stages do we have? To explain that, generally this software testing life cycle is being used for. So this gives a clear understanding over how applications will be developed, followed by the testing procedure will be taken place. That's what generally the software testing life cycles is. In this software testing life cycle, the first one is called requirement analysis. The first one is called requirement analysis. The second one is called test planning. Third one is called test case development. Fourth thing is called test environment. 5, test execution, followed by test cycle closure. So these are the 6 steps will be there in any of the testing. One is requirement analysis. Second is test planning. Third, test case development. 4, test environment setup. 5, test execution, followed by test cycle closure. Now, whenever we are discussing about software testing lifecycle, we must be knowing about what is that we do in requirement analysis. Because whenever being a BA, we will be gathering the requirements from the customer on a high level note. Even testing people will also be involved, because most of the people have some misconception over that testing team will be involved once the coding is done. To an extent it is right, but not to the full extent, because even business testing team will also be involved even right from the requirement analysis stage also. Why? Because so these testing team, whichever the testing team are we talking about, they have to list all the requirements which are testable, because whenever a business analyst is gathering the requirements, etc., so testing team, what testing team do? Testing team will list out, excuse me, list out all the testable requirements which are required for the testing activity. This is what generally the testing team do here. So before that, what they do, testing team has to prepare a list of questions as well as the kind of queries what they want to resolve from these people. Because business analyst is giving you the business requirements, client is supporting for that, team leaders and all everything are developing the projects, right? So they are writing the code and all that, right? Development team, all that. So whatever the relevant questions as well as the queries they want to get resolved from the testing perspective, this is what generally happen by the testing team here. Followed by this, they need to define the test focus and as well as test priorities. What must be the test focus and where, in which areas we have to test and what are our priorities that we have to define equally. So once it is done, we need to list out the testable requirements as I told you. Followed by this, what kind of testing tools are feasible? This is where generally it is required. So because there are different testing tools we use like Selenium, Silk, Windrunner, Load Runner, etc. So we need to see what kind of testing tool is required, because normally testing will be categorized in two different parts. So one is manual testing and second is automation testing. Manual testing means preparing test cases, test plans, test scripts, etc. All these things comes under manual testing. But whereas when it comes to automation testing means we use different tools like Selenium, right? So Windrunner, Load Runner, Silk, right? So etc. Right? So these are the different tools we use for automation testing, all that. So if anybody want to do automation testing, before that manual testing process has to be done. So for that reason, what kind of tools are something feasible, all these will be decided in the first phase, which is the first one. So once it is done, the next is called test planning, right? So here what we have to do based upon the focus and as well as the priorities, this test plan as well as strategy documentation has to be prepared. There are different types of testings, Selenium, unit testing, integration testing, performance testing, right? So different types of testings will be there. So for that, whatever the relevant documentation as well as the strategy which is needed, so all these things will be prepared here. This is where generally we prepare all this information, test planning. Followed by this, in this test planning, we need to define the objective and scope of the project. Means what finally the objective as well as the scope which a customer wants us to achieve. So that information we have to see. This is what and how generally this objective scope of the project or a product is all about. We need to define the objective. We need to define the scope of the project, product, etc. So followed by this, we need to list out the testing types which are there in STLC. As I told you, right? Manual automation, we call it as UAT testing, user acceptance testing, right? So integration testing. Integration testing means whenever we are integrating both hardware and software, how it is performing is called integration testing. Whatever the modules we are testing is called module testing. At the same time, performance testing means how application is performing to do the performance testing. Next, regression testing. Regression testing means, for example, if there is any changes is made in the project in between, and how it is impacting on the other areas and how it is working so far. To know that, generally this regression testings and all everything will be done. So this is all something we call it as testing types, right? So we need to involve in STLC, right? So this sort of knowledge is also we do. After that, based on the feasibility of the testing tool, what we have selected, we have to select what kind of testing tool is required. Are we going for Selenium? Are we going for are we going for Windrunner, Load Runner, right? What kind of testing tool is suitable for us, feasible for us, that we have to select. In most of the occasions, usually testing people use Selenium tool when they are going for testing of the application, all that. So choosing the right testing tool is also one of the key elements. So based on that testing tool, what is that we have selected? We need to do the resource planning. Resource planning means how much resources, how much manpower we require, right? What will be how much, because as developers, we need to see the testing team also, how many testers we require for this project to develop. So all these things has to be decided, right? So we have to decide how much manpower is needed, all that. At the same time, we need to determine the roles and responsibilities of the team also, because experience matters, because some people were experienced, some people may not be. So based on the resource planning, what is that we have made, we need to determine the roles and responsibilities as well. So once we have determined the roles and responsibilities, we have to prepare the test schedule. Test schedule means how to plan, how to execute, right? So the test schedule and all everything we have to plan. So this is all in connected to all these, right? So please do remember everything will have an interconnect. So once this stage is done, in continuation to this, this is the stage which we are doing, right? So the second one, which is called test planning, in this, we have to prepare the test schedule. So once the test schedule is done, the next is test case development. This is where generally testing people prepare different test cases. For example, we are developing an application where we want to create a login page. Okay. What are all should be there in the login page? What are all should be there in the login page, right? So you need to have user ID, password, credentials, etc., etc. All these things are comes under test cases, because there is in this test case there are two things. One is expected result. Second is actual result. One is expected result, second is actual result. Expected result is what customer is expecting. Actual result is what our team has developed. If both are same, test condition will be considered as pass. If both are not same, usually test condition will be considered as fail, and whatever the defects and all everything will be written, and those different defect details will be given to the testing team. So the testing team will perform the activities accordingly. So that is what happens, right? So for that, this is always important for us to prepare the test cases and all everything, so that in this test case, there are two things. One is expected result. Second is actual result. Both are same, pass. If both are not same, again, where was the defects and all everything, that will be addressed by the development team accordingly. So once it is done, we need to prepare test automation and as well as test scripts. Whatever the automation and scripting is required, that will be done by the testing team. Followed by this, what kind of data we want to test, that test data preparation should also be prepared under the test case development. So this is the third one, which is called test case development. The first one is requirement analysis. Second is called test planning, followed by test case development. So once the test case development is done, the next is about test environment setup. Before you are going for doing testing, you have to analyze the requirements. Once the requirement was analyzed, means what are the requirements we have analyzed here, right? In this stage, what are the requirements we have analyzed, all that. So what we have to do, we need to create an environment to do the testing. As development, even for testing also, we require to create an environment. So for that, what are the different hardware and software requirements which are needed for us to develop? And that environment we have to test, and we need to do the smoke testing. Smoke testing means whether the environment was properly aligned or not, right? So if you want to know that, generally the smoke testing and all everything will be done. So once the smoke testing is done, we have to see, right, whether based on the smoke testing, a testing team will come to know whether the environment was properly designed or not. Are there any defects with which we have to rectify before we are going for test execution? All these things has to be done under the test environment setup. So once the test environment setup is done, the next is test execution. This is the fifth one. execution. And whatever the test cases we have prepared here, these test cases will be executed here. Based on the test cases and all, whatever the coding done by the developers and all everything, that will be executed. So execution of the test cases. At the same time, as I mentioned you here, right, pass or fail, right? So expected versus actual result. Pass, failed, or not running, right? So that updation of the status has to be mentioned here. And again, this will be given, you have to write it in the test case document itself. And this information has to be given to the developers. We have to provide this to the developers so that the tracking the defects to the closure will be done in this test execution. So once the test execution is done, the next is about test cycle closure, we call it as. In this test cycle closure, what is that we have to do? We need to evaluate. Yeah. So we need to evaluate the cycle completion criteria, whatever the cycle completion criteria. This is based on the test coverage, quality, cost, time, etc. Followed by this, finally, preparing the test cycle closure report is what we do. So this is what the complete life cycle of software testing one must be good with, especially whenever working on business analysis. We are working as a BA because requirements end of the day being given by the business analyst. Hence, being a business analyst, it is always important for us to know about this test cycle process, test life cycle process, so that it is easy and convenient for us to interact with people, right, who are working on the project, so that effectiveness over the development will be taken place. Is it clear, Monica?
Yes, sir.
Right, so this is what about software testing life cycle.
Okay.
Remaining, anything was left over, that tomorrow I am going to discuss that.
Okay, so we have one more class left, right?
Tomorrow, possible Saturday also, one more.
Saturday also.
Possible.
Saturday and Sunday, both the nights I'm not available.
Okay, tomorrow I will close it. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, let's close it tomorrow, sir.
I will close it tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll complete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Right, Monica. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
चलो कोई नहीं भाई।